Today on Tom's Tinkering and Adventures, wheel bearings. Hello my friends, and welcome to Tom's Tinkering and Adventures. Today we're going to be working on the Yamaha Rhino that we have here. And we had this thing for a couple years and haven't put a lot of hours on it. We kind of took a couple years off and going into the desert, but we've kind of got back into it again. And I bought this thing as a project. The engine was blowing up on it. I got a pretty fair deal. Got the engine going, and I've just been doing here and there maintenance on it, but pretty much just been driving it. Now, every time I used to back this thing up, it always kind of made a squeaking noise. And I just kind of attributed it to maybe the brakes or something like that. And I was going through and doing a really, well, not really, but a thorough maintenance. I actually went and adjusted the suspension finally after all these times of taking it out. And anyway, when I was adjusting this suspension, I noticed the squeaking noise was coming from this wheel when I was backing it up. And I took the tire off and turning that hub, it felt really notchy. You don't notice it when the wheel is on, but once you take the wheel off, you can really feel it. So I looked up the part numbers for the bearings and I ordered them. So for the front wheel bearings, at least on the 660 Rhinos, which I don't know what years that covers. I know they changed to a 700 and it might be different, but 6006 Tech 2 RS is the part number, and you can get that at any bearing supply house you want or order them online. I ordered these Timken bearings. That's a brand name. They're pretty well known, a quality bearing. A lot of the times if you just get this number and put it into Amazon or whatever, bearings will come up really cheap, maybe 4 of them for 10 bucks or something like that. These were not terribly expensive. I think 2 of them were $15 or something like that. But buy the cheap ones if you want. I'm going to put in the Timkens. You can order the OEM ones, and who knows what those are. But we're going to move on. First thing I'm going to do is take this wheel off, and I'll come on back. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the tie rod end, just right down there. It's got a cotter pin in it. The upper ball joint, mount bolt, cotter pin. Lower ball joint, same thing. I'm also going to take off the brake caliper. It's got 2 bolts, one on the top right here and one on the bottom just like that. Caliper will come off. And then this brake hose holding bracket, take that off, push that all out of the side, and I think I'm also going to take this top shock mount off. So when we get all those bolts out of there, we'll move this brake caliper up and out of the way, and then after that we have to take off this. See how that thing is moving? It's just kind of notchy. To take off this nut, now you can see that it's got a little locking tab on it there. So whatever you need to do to get that locking tab out of there, I'm going to try this little pin punch I got, see if I can get it in there. Screwdriver works pretty good. I might resort to a screwdriver. I'll come back after I got all those bolts loose, and I'm just going to take and open that up there. We won't take that off yet. Alright, brake calipers off, upper shock mounts off. That's just to make this a little bit easier to move around. And I got all the nuts off the bottom of these. Sometimes getting ball joints and tie rods off can be a pain. Sometimes they're not too bad. Usually the best trick is just to give them a good whack right on the joint there. See, that one popped out already. There you go. And we'll try the same thing on these. Getting this big nut off of here, if you don't have an impact wrench, it's going to be a pain in the ass. A couple things I could recommend is if you have a helper, you could have them jump in and hold the brake down as hard as they can. You could pull this, I didn't even show removing that. That's on there like that. Remove that, drop this thing down with the wheel on it and hold the brake, and then use a long breaker bar or whatever. I've already broke it loose with this thing here, and it took a little bit of work even with that. But anyway, once that comes off, then your whole I don't know what you even call this, your caliper and your drive face or whatever comes off. Now all we have left is this hub held on with the upper and lower ball joint. So I'm going to give them a tap and we'll hope those come out, and then I'll show you this thing. I had to fight that lower ball joint, actually that lower ball joint a little bit, but it came off. One thing I noticed that I didn't order is these rubber seals, and they are starting to not look the best. So I'm going to end up changing out these bearings, and then I might pull this off again later and replace those. And well, because we're taking this thing out this weekend, so unfortunately I'm just going to have to put these old ones back on. So what you're going to have to do is just get underneath those and pry those out. Like this one I've already started a little bit. Just kind of get underneath it with a flat blade screwdriver and gently pry around it a little bit till you start to see it move. You can see it moving a little bit there. And we'll just try to get that out, and I'll do the same on the other one. Okay, now we got to drive these bearings out. And to do that, I mean, it's nice if you have a vise and punch of some sort. I'm going to try to use this hydraulic piston. It's a cylinder out of a piston out of a hydraulic cylinder. Anyway, the issue is that you have just very little lip there to grab to get started. But once you get the bearing started and it starts moving, then things are going to be a lot easier for you. So whatever it takes, you just got to be persistent. Like this one, you can see I've hammered on this thing a lot, so it's got kind of a little extra hammered edge on there. So I'm going to try to get that into that lip and then kind of drive at an angle like this, which will hopefully kind of wedge it in there and push that down. Now at the beginning of the video, if you notice the Timken bearing box I had seemed kind of light, well, that's because I have already put the bearings in the freezer. I guess I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but if you put your bearings in the freezer, that will shrink them down a little bit. Another trick to use here is if you're struggling and nothing is happening, get your heat gun out if you have one, and then heat up the outer area of this, and hopefully you can cause this to expand enough. So you just got to be persistent. I'm going to start just beating the heck out of it. Now remember what I said about having to be persistent with this thing. I've been working on this for a few minutes off camera, and I finally got it to the point where it's almost ready to come out. It was a lot of work. I did put some heat on it, but little by little you can start to feel this center spacer start to get a little bit more loose, and now she's just a couple of beatings away from popping out. And once the one side gets out, this side will come out very easy. So I'm going to get it out, and we'll show you what it looks like on the inside there. There's the bearing. There's that center piece that keeps you from driving it out. And there's the back side of the other bearing, which I guess is the inner bearing, inner, outer. So this one should be pretty easy. We can just drive this one out through here, hopefully, or at least get it started enough to get it out. And then we will press in the new ones. Once you get your bearings out, take a little bit of time, clean up all the inner races here, all that sort of stuff. And then you want to look for something to drive your new bearings in with. A lot of people like to use a socket. So if you have a large enough socket, you want one that's going to fit close to the outer diameter of this, but it won't hang up on the inner edges of their race. And I like to put a little bit of lubrication in here when I'm driving in the new bearings. Probably some anti-seize could work too, I don't know. I'm not an expert at this. Just a guy in a garage, you know, trying to help show you how to do some stuff. All right, so I'm gonna grab one of the bearings out of the freezer, and we will try to use the vise to press this all together. I'll show you how that works. It's always more fun when you do it on camera. Here she is, fresh out of the freezer. Let's try to get that in there. That's there. And you want to try to get everything as square as you possibly can. As you can see, I'm kind of on the outside edge here, which is not the best. But once it starts going, the bearing will kind of center itself. And it's going in pretty easily now because it's nice and cold. Okay. Now it's getting a little tougher. Try and reposition this, maybe go on this side. Whatever you have to do. You can see it's a little bit crooked there. Hopefully you can see that. I like to not install these with a hammer if you can help it. Now I do have a hydraulic press in the back, but I'm trying to show you that you may be able to get away with doing it like this, but maybe you can't. Okay, so what we might do here is just give it a little tap with the hammer to try to get it straight and then continue on with this, because once it gets going in there, it's going to go in pretty good. It's just a matter of getting it started straight. There we go. There we go. Now we'll try this again. And if you have a bigger vise, that might be a better deal too. So, do what you need to do, but it will have to get bottomed out in there. So. One down, one to go. Now do not make the mistake of forgetting that. Because if you get your bearing in and you don't have your center spacer in, you got to take it completely apart again. So, center spacer's in there. I'm going to get the other bearing installed, and we'll bring you on back. And this bearings went in really easily, being that they were cold, and I lubed them up. So now all we got to do is install those rubber seals and then put this whole thing back together again. Now, I haven't taken a look at the back. Let's run over here real quick. And we'll take a look. The back should be almost exactly the same as the front, I imagine. You're just not going to have a steering knuckle to take off, steering tie rod in. Yeah, so it looks like you have an upper and a lower there, no ball joints. And then I imagine it's the same thing, probably has a nut. And then that hub will come out. Those are different part number bearings, and don't quote me, I think they're 6206. But it's easy enough information to look up. I suggest that you look it up and you buy some good quality bearings. Don't buy the cheap ones. You don't have to buy the OEM ones. Find out what's a good brand. Timken, I can't remember the other ones, SKF. There's a few others that are good quality ones, and they're not that expensive. But I'm going to put this back together. Probably don't need a video of reassembly because it is the opposite of disassembly. I hate it when they say that in the manual, but it's true. We only were showing how to get it off so we could show how to get the bearings off. All right, if you're liking my content, give me a thumbs up. Please leave a comment down below, and if you're not already a subscriber, please consider doing so. Thank you very much for watching. Get out there and find your adventure. Adios.